The first time I walked into David Davis Farm in Earl Township, Lancaster County, it was the middle of August. I expected relief to come from a switch. That was my first mistake. I expected the answer to be electric. I expected a fan somewhere. I expected hidden ductwork. I expected that dry electric hum every modern room makes when it is spending money to stay usable. What I found instead changed something in me. The air touched my face first. It felt cooler by several degrees. The smell came next. Wet stone, old timber, a little lime, a faint dairy sweetness that had soaked into the room long ago. Then I noticed the sound, or really the lack of sound. No compressor, no vent roar, no rattling grill, just water moving under rock. I kept looking for the machine. I checked the corners. I stared at the ceiling. I ran my hand along the wall where a line set should have been. I stood there for 11 minutes looking for the thing I had been trained to expect. It was not there, and that is when I understood I had been wrong about everything. The cooling was already in the building. It was in the ground. It was in the water. It was in the timing of heat itself. The room was not fighting summer. It was letting physics do the heavy work before heat ever reached my skin. That realization hit hard. Then it got stranger. I have gone back to Lancaster County every summer for 3 years now, and every time I find something the building industry forgot on purpose. This time it was a cheap salt-based thermal battery. It worked with old masonry logic and slow airflow. Together, they moved enough heat to keep a room calm through the worst part of the day. No cord, no compressor, no monthly tribute. Here is the promise. You can build a room-scale cooling system for $40 to $112 in base materials. Add the buried air path, and the full build lands at $124 to $287. It can shave 8 to 14 degrees from a small room during a 95-degree afternoon. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago. It still works if you live in a city. It still works if you have never done this before. Stay with me. Because what I found in Lancaster County uses the same physics the Persians used more than 2,000 years ago. They used it to cool desert air. Nobody told you. Not your builder. Not your contractor. Not the man who sold you the bigger unit. That knowledge never disappeared. It was filed away. It was waiting. When I stepped back outside that day, the heat felt staged. It felt almost theatrical. The porch boards burned through my soles. Cicadas screamed from the tree line. 50 steps away, the road shimmered like metal. Then I walked back inside and the room erased all of it, without asking permission from a power plant. That contrast is what changed me. Once you feel it in your own body, the modern sales pitch starts to sound thin. The science is simple once you see it. A salt hydrate stores heat the way a cast iron skillet stores heat, but it stores far more energy during a phase change, instead of just getting hotter. While it changes state near room temperature, it keeps absorbing heat without a sharp rise in surface temperature. That is why it behaves like a battery. Oak Ridge National Laboratory described a building-grade salt hydrate material that stores and releases thermal energy at 18 to 22 degrees Celsius. That is 64.4 to 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly the band where a room starts to feel human again. In 2024, the same lab described salt hydrates as thermal batteries for walls and roofs. It emphasized lower cost, better energy density, and flexible integration into building materials. That is not fringe science. Now add air moisture. In 2023, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory reported liquid desiccant cooling could cut annual energy use by 40% in humid climates. In hot, dry climates, it can cut use by 80%. Their work also described more than 6 hours of stored thermal effect. It reported a heat pump thermal coefficient of performance above 6 and desiccant moisture removal above 5 kilograms per kilowatt hour. Read that twice. Here is the analogy. Your body already knows this trick. Sweat only cools you after moisture leaves your skin. Dry the surrounding air first, and the exact same water cools you harder. The salt does that part. It pulls moisture out of the airstream, then the wetted surface finishes the drop. In plain language, you get multiple units of cooling effect for every unit of drying work. A sealed compressor keeps buying performance with electricity and refrigerant. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, contracts, and service every year. The U.S. Energy Information Administration says home air conditioning used 254 billion kilowatt hours in 2020 alone. That was 19% of all household electricity use. Follow the load, follow the bill. And that is why you have never heard of this. I saw the living proof in Lancaster County, not in a laboratory. The coolest room I entered was banked into the earth. It was shaded by mature trees and quiet enough that I could hear water brushing the stone channel below the floor. Outside, the lane shimmered. The wagon wheels clicked over heat-baked gravel. Inside, my forearms stopped sweating in seconds. A man named Eli stood beside the shelves with me. He did not make a speech. He just pointed at the wall and said, "Stone first, water second, air last." Then he tapped one of the crocks and told me the room had to cool before the food could. That was the order there. His family had used some version of that idea for 4 generations. He said his grandfather learned it from older people who came from older country. The record backs him up. Pennsylvania history documents place Lancaster spring houses in the 1780 to 1865 farm system. They include a recorded example at David Davis Farm around 1800. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission describes them as masonry or frame buildings over a spring or running stream. Many were banked. They were engineered to cool milk and preserve food. Penn State's Amish history timeline traces the migration route through Alsace, the Palatinate, and Bernese communities tied to Canton Bern. The Amish did not read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered. By paying attention to what the earth was already doing. Go back farther and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. These people were separated by oceans, empires, and centuries. They still landed on the same design language. In Yazd, Persian builders paired wind catchers with subterranean water channels. Later passive examples showed measured indoor differences of 16 degrees Celsius or 29 degrees Fahrenheit. In ancient Egypt, builders hung wet reed mats across openings, so moving air shed heat through evaporation. One used towers and tunnels. One used reeds and airflow. Same answer. Then look west. In the Native American Southwest, thick adobe delayed heat flow by roughly 10 to 12 hours. That pushed the daytime spike into the cooler desert night. Medieval Germans banked cellars and food rooms into soil for the same reason. Different land, different wall, different language, same physics. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from Alsace and Canton Bern to Pennsylvania 289 years ago. They kept building it because it worked, and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. The break came when cooling stopped being a building skill and became a product category. In 1906, Willis Carrier received his patent for an apparatus for treating air. That decision protected a machine, a service model, and later an industry built around controlled mechanical comfort. Every room kept cool by masonry, shade, water, and stored thermal mass threatened future equipment sales. Those sales now sit in a market worth tens of billions. Then the mechanism hardened. In 1966, ASHRAE first published Standard 55, Thermal Environmental Conditions for Human Occupancy. The language sounded neutral. It was not neutral in practice. Comfort became something defined inside managed indoor bands and solved with mechanical capacity. Designers were trained to calculate loads, size boxes, and add ducts. They were not trained to start with earth, mass, night cooling, or desiccant storage. That knowledge never disappeared. It was set aside. It was waiting. The Allies were real. Carrier sold the hardware. General Electric sold home air conditioning units and bought attention for them in post-war magazines. The Smithsonian Institution archive still preserves General Electric cooling ads from 1940 and after. Federal housing policy rewarded fast, repeatable, equipment-ready houses after the 1945 Federal Housing Administration draft minimum property requirements. Media sold the dream. Government standardized the shell. Industry sold the box. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from builder practice, contractor estimates, and design culture. Not because it failed, because it was not profitable. The modern continuation looks cleaner, but it follows the same money. You are told to compare SEER ratings, refrigerants, warranties, and financing plans. You are almost never told to compare wall thickness, night flushing, shade depth, soil temperature, or moisture control. That silence is not accidental. It keeps the discussion inside the showroom. In 2022, the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $964,622 on federal lobbying, according to Open Secrets. At the same time, code fights and efficiency fights kept circling around approved equipment, refrigerants, and replacement cycles. The conversation stays trapped around what you buy. It rarely asks what the building could already do, and the money is enormous. The U.S. HVAC systems market is projected in the tens of billions every year. Every passive alternative installed is a condenser that never gets sold. It is a service call that never gets booked and a replacement cycle that never begins. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with land, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation. You need a yard, a drill, and a weekend. What you build is not complicated. Start with a shaded room between 120 and 180 square feet. A bedroom works. A home office works. A nursery works. Build a battery box that is 24 inches wide, 18 inches deep, and 20 inches tall from half-inch plywood. Line the inside with 1-inch polyiso foam. Seal every seam with foil tape and polyurethane caulk. That part matters. Inside the box, set 2 H220 trays, each 16 inches by 20 inches and 2 inches deep. Fill them with stitched muslin cotton sleeves holding 8 to 12 pounds of calcium chloride flakes or a near-ambient salt hydrate blend. Leave a 3-inch air gap above the trays. Staple low-E radiant foil behind them. Then run 2 lengths of 4-inch Schedule 40 PVC through the box with a 2% downward slope toward the outside. If you have a yard, bury those pipes 18 to 24 feet long and at least 36 inches deep. If you have more room, go 30 feet long and 60 inches deep. The deeper run is better. It moves the incoming air towards stable ground temperature before it ever reaches the battery. Paint the outside intake hood white. Face it north or east. Cap it with cedar so direct sun never hits the mouth. If you do not have a yard, build the short version. Put the battery box in a shaded window. Use one 4-inch intake and one 4-inch exhaust pass-through, each 24 to 30 inches long. Keep the outdoor side shaded with a simple 12-inch hood and side baffles. Then recharge the salt sleeves at night by opening the box face from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. When outdoor air falls below 72 degrees, the box dumps stored heat and resets for the next day. City apartment, row house, old ranch, it still works. At the room end, hang a double layer of muslin over a 14-inch by 18-inch cedar frame. Mount that frame 6 inches in front of the box outlet. Feed it from a 2-liter top reservoir with a needle valve or pinch clamp. Keep the drip rate slow. 1 liter over 90 minutes is enough. The now drier air crosses the wet cloth, sheds heat fast, and enters the room cooler and calmer. Warm room air leaves through a high cracked window or a 3-inch transom opening on the opposite side. On a 95-degree day with sticky humidity, this setup can deliver outlet air in the 71 to 77-degree range. It can hold a small room meaningfully calmer through late afternoon. Keep the bed or desk 4 to 6 feet from the outlet stream. Keep interior doors cracked 2 inches so air can move. If you can darken the west window after 2 p.m., performance jumps. I am not talking about meat locker cold. I am talking about a room where you can breathe, sleep, read, and work without feeling hunted by the weather. That is the difference. And here is the part that makes people laugh until they build it. The room does not feel artificially chilled. It feels settled. The walls stop radiating punishment. The sheets stay dry. The air stops sticking to your neck. You sleep deeper because your body is not spending the night throwing heat away. That is what old builders understood. Comfort is not a blast of cold air. Comfort is a slow refusal to let heat take over indoors again. There is one more part people miss. The system works best when you treat the room like a thermal envelope instead of a storage locker. Clear the floor under the outlet. Keep heavy rugs off that zone. Close the room by 10 a.m. if heat is building outside. Then purge it again after sunset. Add a 1-inch wool curtain at the door. Add a reflective shade at the window. The room stops leaking easy gains back into the afternoon. Small habits. Big difference. The material costs stay low. Plywood runs $18 to $26. Polyiso costs $22 to $34. Schedule 40 PVC lands at $28 to $46. Calcium chloride flakes cost $7 to $14 per bag. Muslin, foil, screws, cedar, and sealant add $19 to $41. If you already own a shovel and drill, the full build lands between $124 and $287. One Saturday morning gets the box built. A second weekend handles trenching, pipe, and backfill. One warning. Calcium chloride or a true near-ambient salt hydrate is not optional. Table salt causes weak moisture uptake, surface crusting, and almost no useful thermal storage. Recharge the sleeves outside once a week in peak humidity or once a month in dry heat. Rinse the cloth once a season. Flush the PVC every 2 years. Replace the muslin yearly. That is your maintenance. Your conventional central air costs $5,800 to $11,800 to install. It costs $120 to $312 per month to run in peak summer. It lasts 12 to 17 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $124 to $287 total. It lasts 15 to 25 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellar cooling, gravity-fed water, lime wash walls, I've put it all in one place, step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. You'll find it in the description. But stay here, because what Eli built into that room is the part nobody is talking about yet. If you believe real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. You felt it halfway through this story. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your July power bill, or the cooling method your grandparents trusted in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals about cooling food, water, and sleeping rooms. It uses nothing but lime, shade cloth, and moving air. The technique uses nothing but stone, canvas, and air gaps. And the old bulletin that proves a land grant authority knew about it decades before the average builder forgot, it will hit hard. You are not going to want to miss that one.